So we've talked about the boom during the 1920s, and then we've talked about the collapse in the 1930s. Um, so the Hoover government really fell apart. And in the election of 1932, the governor of New York, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a progressive, was elected president of the United States. And he brought with him policies from New York and declared what he called the New Deal. And so the New Deal was a set of policies that were going to address the collapse of the country, to keep the country stable, to prevent a revolution, and to meet the needs of people. So it included a federal role in providing social welfare. Now, you might remember when we were talking about Dorothea Dix, we ran into a president who vetoed this and said there was no federal role. And so Roosevelt actually makes a major shift in US policy by creating this federal role. And so he developed direct relief, federal relief to families in need. And these federal dollars went to African Americans. So this is really the first time that African Americans begin to enter the mainstream of the social welfare system. It's not a perfect solution, but it is a beginning. So Roosevelt believed that giving people money was a bad idea. And so he quickly moved to what he called a work solution. And he built two administrations. One called the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, which built things and did things in the cities to create jobs. So in New York City, where I am, we built about 5 major bridges. We built a bunch of parkways and freeways. We built parks and beaches. Post offices were built all around the country. And the WPA operated arts programs and childcare programs. The point of this was to use federal dollars to build employment so people could actually function and live under their own terms. I mentioned earlier that states were no longer able to do this because they had to balance their budget. But the federal government doesn't have to balance its budget. It can print more money. And so in a time of collapse like this, printing more money is a way to stimulate the economy. If people have money and are buying things, then factories reopen to make things that the people are buying. And so in doing this, we have what's called in the language an economic stimulation. So the WPA is a major part of this, and probably in whatever city you're in the United States, there will be things that were built by the WPA. The second part of this was aimed at young people, and particularly young men, and that was to take them to the country to do things that needed to be done. And during the 19th and early 20th century, almost the entire US had been deforested. We've been just cutting down forests and building things and not replanting them. So the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, built camps around the country and planted trees everywhere. So if you're in the northeast of the United States, almost all of the trees you see were planted by CCC. But also in the West, in California and in the Rocky Mountain states, there was huge amounts of this. That included building many of the national parks and building dams for electrical systems and so forth. So this was a very large expansion of public employment at a level that we'd never really seen before. Bridges, roads, parks, theaters, and the beginning of public housing. So the first part of the New Deal was this employment program to put people to work. In the next video, we'll be talking about the second part of the New Deal, which is to put in place economic security for working people.